For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had ruled with absolute authority over 700 species across 12 spiral arms. Their chrome towers pierced the clouds of Nexus Prime, their fleets patrolled every hyperspace lane, and their word was law from the outer rim to the core worlds. No species had ever defied them and survived, until the humans walked away. It wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were classified as a Level 4 civilization, barely past primitive fusion drives and crude artificial intelligence. They should have been grateful for the Council's protection, honored to serve as auxiliary forces in their grand design. Instead, they did something that had never been recorded in the Council's vast archives. They said no. Ambassador Thex Farlow of the Hegemony still remembered the moment. The human delegation leader, a small female named Sarah Chen, had stood up from the negotiations table, her dark eyes cold as the void between stars. "We reject your terms," she had said in that strange, melodic language of theirs. All of them. The chamber had fallen silent. Even the usually chattering Vextai had stopped their incessant buzzing. In 3 millennia of galactic governance, no one had simply left. But the humans had. They walked out of the council chambers, boarded their crude metal ships, and disappeared into the void. That was 6 months ago. Now, as Admiral Korth's Grand Armada approached the human home system of Sol, something felt wrong. The humans had gone quiet. Too quiet. Their electromagnetic chatter had ceased. Their trade routes lay abandoned. It was as if an entire species had simply vanished. What the galaxy didn't know, what the Council in their arrogance had never bothered to discover, was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their capacity for absolute, terrifying determination when cornered. They called it spite. The galaxy was about to learn a new word. The last transmission from Earth had been simple, broadcast on all frequencies in perfect galactic standard. You should have accepted our counteroffer. Then silence. 6 months of it. Until today. Today, Admiral Korth would discover what happens when you threaten a species that had survived ice ages, world wars, plagues, and the death of their own planet's biosphere. Today, the galaxy would learn why humans were the only species to ever walk away from the Council's table. And today, the balance of power that had stood for 3,000 years would shatter like crystal in a hurricane. The story you're about to read is not about humanity's rise to greatness. It's about what happens when a sleeping giant finally decides it's tired of being poked with sticks. Admiral Korthvel examined the tactical display with growing unease. The massive holographic projection showed the Sol system in perfect detail, every planet, moon, and asteroid belt mapped with precision. But something was fundamentally wrong with what he was seeing. "Where are they?" he rumbled, his forearms crossed behind his carapace. The bridge of the CNS Dominion hummed with activity as his crew prepared for what should have been a simple subjugation mission. "Sir, we're detecting no active settlements on any of the outer worlds," reported Lieutenant Zixara from the sensor station. Her tentacles danced across the control interface with nervous energy. "Mars shows signs of recent evacuation. The orbital platforms around Jupiter are completely abandoned. Even the mining operations in the asteroid belt have gone dark." Korth's mandibles clicked in frustration. The humans had been busy in their corner of the galaxy for nearly 2 centuries since first contact. Their expansion into their home system had been rapid and chaotic. Typical of young species drunk on their first taste of space travel, industrial platforms, research stations, and terraforming operations had sprouted like fungal growth throughout Sol. The Council had been impressed despite themselves. The humans showed remarkable adaptability for such a primitive species. Now it was all gone. Not destroyed, evacuated. Every single installation had been systematically stripped and abandoned. "What about Earth?" Korth demanded. The sensor officer's chromatophores flickered yellow with uncertainty. "That's complicated, sir. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface, but they're unlike anything in our databases. The electromagnetic spectrum is completely distorted. It's as if the entire planet is wrapped in some kind of interference field." Captain Mordeth, Korth's second-in-command, leaned forward in his command throne. The hegemony's cybernetic implants gleamed along his skull. "Perhaps they're hiding, Admiral. Humans are known for their deception and cowardice. A planetary shield would be a logical defensive measure for such a weak species." Korth wasn't convinced. In his 4 decades of military service, he had subjugated 17 species. He knew the patterns. Desperate civilizations either surrendered immediately when faced with superior firepower, or they fought back with everything they had. They didn't simply disappear. Communications Have we received any response to our surrender demands? He asked. No, sir, came the reply from the comm station. We've been broadcasting on all frequencies for 3 standard hours, not even an acknowledgement. The Admiral turned to study the strategic map of the Sol system one more time. His fleet was massive by any standard. 300 ships of various classes, including 12 dreadnoughts and his own supercarrier. It was enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag, let alone force the surrender of a level 4 civilization. The humans should be terrified. Instead, they had gone silent. Sir! The sensor officer's voice cracked with excitement. I'm detecting movement around Earth. Small craft are launching from the surface. How many? Korth demanded, moving to the tactical station. Difficult to say through the interference, but, Admiral, these readings can't be right. I'm showing thousands of launches. Maybe tens of thousands. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Even for a species as prolific as humans, tens of thousands of ships represented an enormous fleet. Where had they gotten the resources? The infrastructure? The Council's intelligence reports had indicated the humans possessed fewer than 50 capital ships. Display what you can resolve, Korth ordered. The main screen flickered and displayed a grainy, interference-laden image of Earth. The planet appeared normal at first glance. Blue oceans, brown continents, white clouds. But as the resolution improved, details became visible that made Korth's blood run cold. The continents were wrong. Where major population centers should have been, there were massive geometric structures. Perfectly straight lines kilometers long carved across landscapes. Enormous hexagonal patterns covered areas the size of small countries. And from these structures, streams of objects were rising into orbit. Zoom in on those launch tracks, Korth commanded. The image shifted and focused on one of the launch corridors. What they saw defied logic. Ships, if they could be called ships, were ascending from the surface in perfect formation, spaced exactly 3 seconds apart. Each vessel was sleek and angular, nothing like the bulky, crude designs the humans had been using just months ago. How long has this launch sequence been running? Korth asked quietly. Sir, based on the orbital mechanics, they've been launching continuously for at least 72 hours, possibly longer. The implications hit Korth like a physical blow. If humans had been launching ships for 3 days straight at this rate, they had put more vessels into space than the entire Galactic Council fleet. It was impossible. The logistics alone would require resources that simply didn't exist. Admiral, Captain Mortis' voice was tight with controlled panic. I'm receiving tactical updates from the scout ships on our flanks. They're reporting similar launch activities from Mars. But the sensors showed it was abandoned. Not abandoned, sir. Camouflaged. The entire surface appears to be artificial. Geometric patterns like Earth but larger, much larger. Korth felt the first stirrings of genuine fear. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Species didn't just transform their entire worlds in a matter of months. It wasn't possible. Sir! The communications officer's voice cut through his thoughts. We're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth. About time, Korth growled, though he felt anything but relieved. Put it through. The main screen shifted to display a human female. She appeared young by their standards, with the dark hair and pale skin common to their species. She wore a simple grey uniform with no visible rank insignia. Behind her, Korth could see what appeared to be a command center of some kind, filled with humans working at stations covered in displays and controls. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Space Coalition, the woman said in perfect galactic standard. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. You are Admiral Korfel of the Galactic Council Armed Forces. Korf straightened. I am indeed. You will surrender your world immediately and submit to Council authority. Your species' rebellion ends now. The human female, Sarah Chen, smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Admiral. We're not rebelling against Council authority. We're rejecting it entirely. There's a difference. Your fleet is impressive for such a primitive species, Korth admitted. But 300 Council ships will make short work of whatever you've managed to cobble together. 300 ships? Sarah repeated thoughtfully.
Yes, we know.
We've been tracking your fleet since you left Nexus Prime 3 weeks ago. Impressive vessels, Admiral. The CNS Dominion is particularly magnificent. 12 kilometers long, crew of 50,000, armed with graviton pulse cannons and quantum torpedoes. A mobile fortress capable of devastating entire star systems. Korth's four eyes narrowed. Human intelligence was better than expected if they had detailed specifications on his flagship. It is indeed, he said carefully. Now you understand the futility of resistance. Sarah's smile widened. Oh, Admiral. You still don't understand, do you? We're not trying to fight your fleet. Then you surrender? Not exactly. Sarah's expression grew serious. Admiral Korthvel, do you know what humans call a Pyrrhic victory? I am not familiar with the term. It refers to a victory that inflicts such a devastating toll on the victor that it's essentially a defeat. Named after King Pyrrhus, who won a battle but lost so many soldiers that he said, "One more such victory and we are lost." Sarah paused, studying his face. The thing about humans, Admiral, is that we're very good at losing. We've had a lot of practice. Korth felt his confusion deepening. What are you talking about? Your fleet represents approximately 12% of the Council's total military force. 300 ships, 700,000 personnel, the most advanced weapons and defensive systems in the known galaxy. If you were to return to Nexus Prime right now, you would still be the dominant military power in local space. That is correct. But you're not going to return to Nexus Prime, are you, Admiral? You're going to try to force our compliance. You're going to attack Earth. Korth's mandibles clicked with irritation. If necessary, yes. Sarah nodded slowly. I thought so. The Council's arrogance is legendary, even by human standards. Tell me, Admiral, in your 40 years of military service, how many species have you subjugated? 17, Korth replied automatically, then immediately regretted revealing the information. 17 species, Sarah repeated. All of them surrendered when faced with superior firepower, didn't they? Oh, a few put up token resistance, but none of them were willing to pay the real price for freedom. Freedom is an illusion maintained by those too weak to accept reality. Korth quoted from the Council's military doctrine. Is it? Sarah's eyes seemed to look directly through the screen at him. Admiral, what would you do if your species faced extinction? If the only choice was submission or death, what would you choose? Survival is always preferable to destruction. We thought you might say that. It's why we've prepared something special for you. A demonstration of what happens when humans are given that choice. Korth felt a chill run down his spine. What are you talking about? Sarah turned to someone off-screen and nodded. When she looked back at Korth, her expression was sad but determined. Admiral, every human ship you're seeing launch from Earth and Mars is crewed by volunteers. Men and women who chose to be here knowing exactly what was going to happen. Each ship is equipped with the most powerful reactor we could build, and approximately 3 tons of antimatter. The blood drained from Korth's face. Antimatter was heavily regulated by the Council. Primitive species weren't supposed to have access to such dangerous technology. You're bluffing, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. We've been building these ships for 6 months, Admiral, ever since we walked away from your negotiating table. We stripped every world in our system, every orbital platform, every asteroid mine. We harvested every resource we could find and turned it into ships and antimatter. Do you want to know how many ships we've built? Korth's throat felt dry. How many? 40. 7,312 ships, Admiral. Each one piloted by a volunteer who has already said goodbye to their families. Each one carrying enough antimatter to crack a moon in half. The bridge of the Dominion fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the life support system seemed to fade. And Admiral? Sarah's voice continued softly. Every single one of those ships is aimed directly at your fleet. Korth stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. 47,000 ships. Volunteers who had said goodbye to their families. 3 tons of antimatter per ship. You're talking about suicide, he whispered. We're talking about choice, Sarah corrected. The choice between submission and freedom. The choice between living on our knees or dying on our feet. It's a choice humans have made before, Admiral. Many times. Your entire species will survive on the colony ships we've already sent beyond the galactic rim. Hidden, prepared, and very, very angry. Sarah's expression hardened. Admiral, you have 10 minutes to begin withdrawing your fleet. If you do not, we will demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. You're insane, Korth breathed. Perhaps, Sarah admitted. But we're also free, and we intend to stay that way. 10 minutes, Admiral? Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Korth staring at a blank screen. while the magnitude of the human threat sank in. 47,000 kamikaze ships, volunteers who had already accepted death, an entire species willing to sacrifice itself rather than submit. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Korthfell of the Galactic Council faced an enemy that truly could not be defeated, because they had already chosen to lose everything rather than surrender. The question now was whether the Council fleet was willing to pay the price for victory. 8 minutes remained on the human ultimatum when Captain Mordeth broke the stunned silence on the Dominion's bridge. "Admiral, surely they're bluffing. No species would sacrifice itself for such an abstract concept as freedom." Korth wanted to believe his second-in-command, but decades of military experience had taught him to recognize genuine threats from empty posturing. The humans' voice patterns showed no signs of deception. Their fleet movements were too coordinated, too purposeful to be a bluff, and the sheer scale of their preparation spoke to a level of commitment that chilled him to his core. "Tactical analysis," he ordered tersely. "If the humans are telling the truth about their ship count and armament, what are we facing?" Lieutenant Commander Vexari, the fleet's senior tactical officer, worked rapidly at his console. His insectoid features remained impassive, but Korth could see the tension in his movements. "Sir, 47,000 ships armed with antimatter warheads presents a tactical scenario outside our combat doctrine parameters. Even assuming our point defense systems achieve 95% effectiveness, which is optimistic against such numbers, we would still face approximately 2,000 successful strikes. Damage assessment for 2,000 antimatter detonations." Vexari paused, double-checking his calculations. "Sir, total fleet destruction. Even glancing hits from antimatter weapons would cripple or destroy our largest vessels. The humans appear to have solved the tactical problem of engaging a superior force through overwhelming numerical superiority combined with acceptable casualties." "Acceptable casualties," Korth repeated bitterly. The humans were discussing the annihilation of their own fleet as if it were a reasonable tactical trade-off. It violated every principle of military strategy he had ever learned. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "I'm receiving priority transmissions from the Council. Fleet Command is demanding status updates." Korth straightened. The Council would expect him to proceed regardless of human threats. They had never encountered meaningful resistance in 3,000 years of galactic dominance. The concept of a species willing to destroy itself rather than submit was alien to their thinking. "Put me through to Admiral Thexvala," he commanded. The main screen shifted to display the austere command center of the Council flagship Eternal Dominion, currently stationed at Nexus Prime. Admiral Thexvala of the Hegemony appeared on screen, her cybernetic implants gleaming against her pale skin. "Admiral Korth, you're behind schedule. The human system should have been secured hours ago." "Admiral, we've encountered complications. The humans have made significant preparations for our arrival." Thexvala's expression remained coldly neutral, elaborate. Korth quickly summarized the human fleet deployment and their threat to use kamikaze attacks. As he spoke, he watched Thexvala's face for any sign of concern. There was none. "Fascinating," she said when he finished. "The humans appear to have embraced a form of military doctrine based on mutually assured destruction. Such tactics are occasionally employed by desperate primitive species. Admiral, they're threatening to sacrifice their entire military force, 47,000 ships. An impressive number for such a young species," Thexvala acknowledged. "But ultimately irrelevant. Admiral Korth, your mission parameters remain unchanged. Secure the human system and bring their leadership into Council custody. How they choose to resist is immaterial. But if they follow through on their threat, then we will rebuild our fleet with the resources of 46 more compliant species." Thexvala interrupted.
"Admiral, the Council has ruled this galaxy for 3 millennia, because we do not negotiate with terrorists, and we do not allow inferior species to dictate terms to their superiors."
"Proceed with your mission." The transmission ended, leaving Korth alone with his impossible orders. He understood the Council's position. To negotiate with humans would set a precedent that could inspire other species to rebellion. But he also understood what human resistance would cost his fleet. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "the human ships are moving into attack formation. They're forming a spherical deployment pattern around our fleet." Korth turned to the tactical display. Thousands of red dots were visible now, moving with mechanical precision into position. The humans weren't trying to outmaneuver his fleet or gain tactical advantage. They were simply surrounding them, creating an inescapable kill zone.
Distance to nearest human ships? Approximately 50,000 kilometers and closing at steady acceleration.
At current approach speed, they'll reach optimal attack range in 6 minutes. Korth found himself studying the tactical scenario with professional detachment. From a purely military standpoint, the humans had created an elegant solution to the problem of fighting a superior force. They had identified their enemy's greatest weakness, the assumption that all rational actors would choose survival over principle, and exploited it ruthlessly. But was it really rational? Korth had spent decades studying military history, including the few instances where species had chosen mutual destruction over surrender. In every case, the destroying species had been facing immediate extinction anyway. They had nothing left to lose. The humans were different. Their home system was thriving. Their population was healthy. Their technology was advancing rapidly. They had everything to live for, and they were choosing to die anyway. Communications, open a channel to Admiral Chen, he ordered. Sarah Chen appeared on screen again, looking exactly as composed as she had during their first conversation. Behind her, Korth could see human technicians working calmly at their stations, as if they weren't minutes away from launching a suicidal attack. Admiral Chen, I need to understand something. Your species has everything to gain from joining the galactic community. Resources, technology, protection from hostile forces. Why are you choosing extinction over cooperation? Sarah's expression remained neutral. Admiral, I think you misunderstand our position. We're not choosing extinction. We're choosing freedom. There's a difference. But if you attack our fleet, your ships will be destroyed. Your crews will die. Yes, they will. 47,000 of our best and brightest, gone in a matter of hours. It will be the greatest tragedy in human history. Then why do it? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face through the screen. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that Korth had never heard from any alien species. Admiral, do you have children? I've spawned twice, Korth replied carefully. And if someone told you that your children could live comfortably as slaves, never knowing hunger or cold or fear, but also never knowing choice or dignity or the right to determine their own fate, would you consider that a good life? Korth felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation.
I would consider it survival. We wouldn't. Sarah's voice was firm.
Admiral, humanity has a saying, give me liberty or give me death. It's from our early history, when we were still fighting for basic freedoms on our own world. Some things, we believe, are worth dying for. Abstract concepts like freedom are not worth the destruction of your species. That's where you're wrong. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Admiral, you've conquered 17 species. Tell me, how many of them are thriving under Council rule? Korth hesitated. The truth was that most subjugated species served in menial roles, providing labor and resources for the Council's expansion. They were fed, housed, and protected, but few could be described as thriving. They are provided for according to their needs and abilities, he said carefully. In other words, they're slaves. Comfortable slaves, perhaps, but slaves nonetheless. Sarah's eyes hardened. Admiral, every one of those species made the same choice you're asking us to make. They chose survival over freedom. And what did they get? Generations of servitude, watching their children grow up knowing they'll never be anything more than tools for their master's use.
The Council provides order, stability, peace. The Council provides control, Sarah interrupted.
There's a difference between peace and submission, Admiral. One is chosen, the other is imposed. Korth found himself thinking of his own homeworld brought into the Council's sphere through diplomatic pressure rather than conquest. The hegemony had been given a choice. Join willingly and maintain some autonomy, or be conquered and integrated by force. They had chosen to join. But had it really been a choice? The alternative had been the same destruction now facing humanity. Admiral, his tactical officer called out. 4 minutes to optimal attack range. Korth looked back at Sarah Chen. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind? No concession that would make Council membership acceptable? Sarah shook her head sadly. We offered concessions, Admiral. 6 months ago, when we were still willing to negotiate, we offered to share our technological advances, to contribute our unique perspective to galactic civilization, to serve as partners rather than subjects. The Council rejected every proposal. The Council does not negotiate with inferior species. And that, Sarah said softly, is exactly why this has to happen. The Council needs to learn that not every species will accept inferiority as their permanent condition. Sometimes, the only way to teach that lesson is through loss. You're talking about destroying yourselves to make a point. No, Admiral. We're destroying ourselves to make a statement. There's a difference. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Every species in the galaxy will hear about what happens here today. They'll learn that humans chose death over slavery, that we fought back when fighting back seemed impossible, and some of them, someday, might remember that choice when they faced their own moment of decision. Korth felt a chill of understanding. The humans weren't just planning to attack his fleet, they were planning to create a legend, a story that would spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other species to question Council authority. You're trying to start a rebellion, he said quietly. We're trying to start a conversation, Sarah corrected. For 3,000 years, the Council has ruled through the assumption that all rational species will choose survival over principle. We're about to prove that assumption wrong. At the cost of your entire fleet. At the cost of our entire fleet, Sarah agreed. Admiral, do you want to know the last thing our pilots hear before they launch? It's a recording from every human colony ship that escaped beyond the galactic rim. Men, women, and children telling their friends and family that they love them and that their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Every pilot flying toward your fleet knows that humanity will survive and that their deaths will have meaning. Korth stared at the screen in growing horror. The humans had planned for their own species' survival while simultaneously preparing for a devastating suicide attack. It was methodical, comprehensive, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. 2 minutes to optimal range, his tactical officer reported. Admiral Chen, Korth said urgently, there has to be another way. Some compromise. There was, Sarah interrupted. 6 months ago. But the Council chose to send you here instead of continuing negotiations. This is the consequence of that choice. Korth realized with sudden clarity that the humans weren't just angry about the Council's demands. They were angry about being dismissed, about having their attempts at negotiation rejected out of hand. The Council had treated them like children throwing a tantrum, never considering that they might have a valid perspective. The Council could reconsider, he offered desperately. Sarah smiled sadly. After they watch you die, Admiral, they might. But by then it will be too late for both of us. 1 minute to optimal range. Korth looked around his bridge at officers who had served with him for years, good people, dedicated to their duty, who would die because of decisions made by distant politicians who had never faced the consequences of their arrogance. And then he made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. All ships, he commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet's communication network. This is Admiral Korthvel. Begin immediate withdrawal from the Sol system. Maximum acceleration. Execute now. The bridge erupted in shocked exclamations. Captain Mordith rose from his command throne. Admiral, the Council's orders. Can go to hell, Korth said quietly. I will not sacrifice 700,000 beings for the Council's pride. On the screen, Admiral Sarah Chen was staring at him in obvious surprise. Admiral, she said carefully, are you withdrawing? I am. My fleet will be clear of your system within 6 hours. Korth straightened his shoulders, knowing he had just ended his own career. Admiral Chen, please convey to your people that they have made their point. The galaxy will indeed remember what happened here. Air. Sarah's expression softened. Thank you, Admiral. I know that decision couldn't have been easy. Korth nodded grimly. Perhaps the Council will be more willing to listen when they learn what humanity was prepared to do. Perhaps not. But either way, today ends without unnecessary death. Today ends, Sarah agreed. But Admiral, this is just the beginning. As the Council fleet began its acceleration away from Earth, Korth understood that Sarah Chen was right. The humans had won without firing a shot, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the willingness to use it. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after Admiral Korthvel's withdrawal from the Sol system. The massive chamber on Nexus Prime, normally a place of calm deliberation, buzzed with agitated voices from 700 species as news of the human standoff spread throughout the galaxy. Admiral Thexvala stood before the assembled representatives, her cybernetic implants gleaming under the chamber's harsh lighting. Behind her, a holographic display showed the tactical situation at Sol, thousands of human ships still maintaining their spherical formation around empty space, a reminder of how close the galaxy had come to witnessing unprecedented destruction. Honorable representatives. Thexvala began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber through universal translators. We face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of galactic civilization. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. In the 3,000 years since the Council's establishment, the word crisis had rarely been spoken in these chambers.
The Council's dominance had been so complete, so unquestioned, that serious challenges simply didn't exist. The human species has demonstrated a willingness to embrace total military annihilation rather than accept integration into galactic society.
Admiral Corthel's withdrawal, while tactically sound, has created a dangerous precedent that threatens the stability of our entire system of governance. Councillor Vexti of the Hive Collective raised a chitinous arm. As one of the Council's founding species, the Vexti carried significant influence in the chamber. Admiral Thexvala, surely the threat posed by a single primitive species is manageable. The humans number fewer than 20 billion individuals across their entire civilization. They lack advanced hyperspace technology, sophisticated AI, or significant industrial capacity beyond their home system. That assessment is incorrect, Thexvala replied coldly. Our intelligence services have completed a comprehensive analysis of human capabilities based on their recent activities. The results are disturbing. The holographic display shifted to show detailed schematics of human ship designs intercepted during their withdrawal. The vessels were sleek, angular, and completely unlike the crude designs the Council had observed during first contact 2 centuries ago. These ships represent a complete technological paradigm shift accomplished in 6 months. The humans have developed propulsion systems 20% more efficient than our standard designs, structural materials that are lighter and stronger than our best composites, and targeting systems of unprecedented accuracy. Most concerning, they have achieved this advancement without any external assistance. Councillor Thrain of the Aquatic Federation spoke from his environmental tank, his translated voice bubbling with concern. How is such rapid advancement possible? Through the systematic stripping of their entire stellar civilization, Thexvala explained. The humans dismantled every orbital platform, every mining operation, every research facility in their system. They converted approximately 80% of their total industrial capacity into ship construction and antimatter production. It represents the most comprehensive militarization of a species' resources we have ever encountered. Surely this leaves them vulnerable, suggested Councillor Mortan of the Mechanist Alliance. A species that has converted its civilian infrastructure into weapons cannot sustain itself long-term. Under normal circumstances, that would be correct. However, our analysis indicates that the humans have already launched colonial expeditions beyond the galactic rim. Conservative estimates suggest they have relocated approximately 30% of their population to hidden systems outside Council space. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans hadn't just prepared for a military confrontation, they had prepared for species survival in the event of total defeat. It was a level of strategic thinking that impressed and terrified the Council in equal measure. Councillor Yexara of the Philosophical Enclaves, one of the most ancient species in the Council, spoke with a voice like rustling leaves. Admiral Thexvala, in your professional opinion, what motivated this extreme response?
The Council's integration terms were generous by historical standards.
Thexvala paused, reviewing the intelligence reports one more time. The humans appear to possess an unusual psychological trait that our xenopsychologists term principled defiance. Unlike most species which prioritize survival over abstract concepts, humans demonstrate a willingness to accept death rather than compromise certain core beliefs. Beliefs such as self-determination, individual autonomy, and what they call dignity. Our experts believe these concepts are so fundamental to human psychology that they view forced compliance as a fate worse than death. Councillor Vexti's mandibles clicked with agitation. Such thinking is irrational. No abstract principle is worth species extinction. Perhaps Thexvala agreed, but the humans disagree, and their disagreement has created a tactical scenario we cannot reliably counter. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a tactical analysis of the aborted Sol engagement. 47,000 ships armed with antimatter warheads, crewed by volunteers who have psychologically prepared for death. Even with our full military might, we cannot guarantee victory against such tactics without accepting casualties that would cripple our fleet for decades. Are you suggesting the humans are militarily superior? Councillor Martin asked incredulously. I am suggesting that military superiority becomes irrelevant when facing an enemy willing to accept total destruction to achieve their goals. The humans have solved the fundamental problem of asymmetric warfare through the simple expedient of not caring whether they survive. Councillor Thrain's tank bubbled with agitation. Admiral, surely there must be alternatives to military confrontation. Economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, technological embargoes, all considered and rejected. The humans have prepared for complete isolation from galactic civilization. They have developed closed-loop industrial systems, independent food production, and technological bases that require no external resources. Conventional pressure tactics will not succeed. Councillor Yexara leaned forward in their environmental suite. Admiral, what do you recommend?
Thexvala stood silent for a long moment, knowing that her next words would echo through galactic history.
I recommend we let them go. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives from hundreds of species spoke at once, creating a cacophony that took several minutes to subside. Explain your reasoning, Admiral. Councillor Vextai commanded when order was restored. The humans have demonstrated that forced integration will cost more than it provides. They possess no strategic resources we require, no territory we need, and no technology we cannot develop independently. The price of compelling their compliance would damage our military capacity for decades and create a precedent of resistance that could inspire other species to similar actions. And if we simply allow them to remain independent? Then we maintain a single exception to galactic unity while preserving our ability to govern the remainder of civilized space. The humans become an isolated aberration rather than a galactic threat. Councillor Morthan's mechanical voice carried a note of disbelief. You're suggesting we abandon 3,000 years of precedent because one primitive species threatens us. I am suggesting we adapt our strategies to account for an enemy whose tactical doctrine is based on acceptable losses that we cannot match. The humans have demonstrated that they value their principles more than their lives. Unless we are prepared to value our principles more than our entire fleet, we cannot defeat them through conventional means. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a shroud. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was being asked to back down from a military confrontation, not because they couldn't win, but because victory would cost more than defeat. There is another consideration, Thexvala continued. Admiral Korthfeld's decision to withdraw has been transmitted throughout the galaxy. Every species under Council rule now knows that humans forced a Council fleet to retreat through the threat of mutual destruction. That information is already inspiring questions about Council authority among our subject species. Questions that could be answered through demonstration of superior force, Councillor Vextai suggested. Or through demonstration of superior wisdom, Councillor Yexara countered. Admiral Thexvala, what intelligence do we have regarding human intentions beyond their immediate independence? Their colony ships have established settlements in 3 systems beyond the galactic rim. All are located in regions with minimal strategic value, but significant defensive advantages. They appear to be building an isolated civilization with no intention of expanding into Council space. And their attitude toward galactic civilization in general?
Thexvala hesitated.
Mixed. Human communications intercepts suggest they bear no particular hostility toward individual Council species. Their objection appears to be specifically with the concept of forced subjugation, rather than galactic unity itself. Meaning they might be willing to engage in voluntary cooperation? Possibly. However, any such cooperation would need to be conducted between equals rather than through the traditional Council hierarchy. The implications of that statement reverberated through the chamber. The Council had never recognized any species as equal. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on the principle of Council supremacy over subject species. Councillor Thrain spoke carefully. Admiral, are you suggesting we consider recognizing human sovereignty? I am suggesting we consider whether maintaining absolute authority over every species in the galaxy is worth the cost of compelling that authority against those willing to die to resist it. Councillor Yexara's ancient voice carried a note of contemplation. 3,000 years ago, when the Council was first established, we faced a similar choice. We could rule through cooperation or through dominion. We chose dominion because it was simpler and more reliable. Perhaps it is time to reconsider that choice. The precedent alone would be catastrophic, Councillor Mortan protested. If we allow humans to maintain independence, every species in the galaxy will demand similar treatment.
Will they?
Thexvala asked. The humans achieved independence by preparing to sacrifice their entire military force. Most species lack both the resolve and the tactical doctrine necessary for such extreme measures. The precedent may be less dangerous than we fear, or more dangerous than we can imagine, Councillor Vextai retorted. If species begin viewing human defiance as a model for resistance, we could face the collapse of galactic civilization. Or its evolution, Counselor Yexara suggested quietly. The debate continued for hours as representatives grappled with concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of galactic power structures. Some argued for overwhelming military response regardless of cost. Others suggested attempting diplomatic engagement with the humans as equals. Still others proposed containment strategies designed to isolate human influence while avoiding direct confrontation. Finally, Counselor Yexara called for silence. We face a decision that will define the next millennium of galactic history. Do we maintain our absolute authority through force, accepting whatever cost that requires? Or do we adapt our governance to account for species that cannot be compelled to comply? The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone expected. By a margin of just 37 votes out of 700, the Council chose adaptation over confrontation. The human exemption, as it would come to be known, recognized human sovereignty over their claimed territories while maintaining Council authority over the rest of galactic space. It was the first exception to Council supremacy in 3,000 years. It would not be the last. As news of the Council's decision spread throughout the galaxy, Admiral Korthfell received a personal message from Admiral Sarah Chen. It contained only 7 words: "Thank you for choosing wisdom over pride." But attached to the message was something else. Detailed specifications for human propulsion technology, freely shared as a gesture of goodwill between equals. The galaxy had changed. The only question now was whether that change would bring evolution or revolution. 2 years after the human exemption, the galaxy was beginning to understand the true cost of precedent. What had seemed like an isolated incident, involving one stubborn species, had become a catalyst for changes no one had anticipated. Commander Zaraketh of the Stellaris Dominion stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Quantum Dawn, watching the impossible sight before her. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she could see a human colony ship, one of their massive Ark-class vessels, docked peacefully alongside a Vexdai merchant hauler and a mechanist science frigate. "Report, Lieutenant," she commanded, her 4 eyes never leaving the scene outside. Lieutenant Nexaros, a recent graduate from the Academy, checked his tablet with nervous energy. "The human vessel New Horizon has been in orbit around Kepler, FO42b, for 6 months, Commander. They've established a research colony on the surface in cooperation with the Vexdai Collective and the Mechanist Alliance." Cooperation. Zaraketh repeated the word, as if it tasted strange. In her 40 years of military service, cooperation between species had always been mediated through Council authority. Independent collaboration was unprecedented. What are they researching? Exotic matter synthesis, Commander. Apparently, the humans have developed theoretical frameworks that complement Vexdai industrial capacity and mechanist manufacturing precision. Together, they've achieved breakthrough results in matter-energy conversion efficiency. Zaraketh felt the familiar chill that had become common among Council officers over the past 2 years. The humans weren't just maintaining their independence. They were actively engaging with other species on terms of equality, sharing technology and resources in ways that bypassed Council oversight entirely. Any violations of the exemption terms? No, Commander. All activities are taking place in unclaimed space beyond Council jurisdiction. The colony has been declared neutral territory under voluntary agreement between all 3 species. Zaraketh's mandibles clicked with frustration. The human exemption had been carefully worded to prevent exactly this scenario, but the lawyers had been outmaneuvered by human pragmatism. The humans weren't violating the letter of the agreement while completely subverting its spirit. Commander. Lieutenant Nexaros continued hesitantly. There's more. Intelligence reports indicate similar cooperative ventures have been established in 12 other systems. Humans are working with the Aquatic Federation on ocean world terraforming, with the Philosophical Enclaves on consciousness transfer research, and with the Mining Guild on asteroid processing techniques. 12 systems, Zaraketh muttered. The implications were staggering. The Council's power had always rested on their role as the sole mediator between species. If those species could cooperate directly, what need did they have for Council oversight? Her communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display showed Admiral Thexvala's familiar features, though she looked older than Zaraketh remembered. Commander Zaraketh, report to Nexus Prime immediately. We have a situation. 3 days later, Zaraketh stood in the Council's strategic planning chamber, studying the most disturbing intelligence report she had ever seen. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with dozens of red indicators marking locations of human cooperative ventures. The situation is worse than we initially assessed, Admiral Thex Vala explained to the assembled officers. Human technology sharing has accelerated development across multiple species at rates we cannot match through traditional council research programs. General Korthmex of the hegemony Admiral Korthfel's replacement after his forced resignation studied the display with obvious concern. Admiral, are we facing a technological revolution?
We are facing something far more dangerous, Thexvala replied.
We are facing a philosophical revolution. The humans have demonstrated that species can achieve greater advancement through voluntary cooperation than through hierarchical command structures. Commander Yekstara of the Intelligence Division leaned forward. Admiral, our analysis suggests the human approach to technology sharing is fundamentally different from Council protocols. Instead of controlling information flow to maintain strategic advantages, they freely distribute innovations to all cooperative partners. The result, Thexvala continued grimly, is that species working with humans are advancing faster than species under Council protection. We are beginning to see requests for independence from multiple subject species. Sarakath felt her blood run cold. How many requests? 17 formal independence petitions in the past 6 months, all citing the human precedent as justification for voluntary withdrawal from Council authority. General Korthmex's cybernetic implants flickered with agitation. Surely we can deny such requests. The human exemption was a unique circumstance. We can deny them, Thexvala agreed. But enforcement becomes problematic when the requesting species have access to human military technology. The holographic display shifted to show detailed analysis of ships observed in the cooperative systems. The vessels combined human propulsion systems with species-specific modifications that created entirely new classes of spacecraft. The Vexdai have integrated human antimatter containment technology with their swarm coordination protocols. The result is a fleet architecture that could potentially overwhelm our defensive systems through sheer numerical superiority. The Mechanist Alliance has combined human structural materials with their manufacturing automation. They can now build ships faster and cheaper than our most efficient shipyards. The Aquatic Federation has adapted human environmental systems for aquatic species. For the first time in galactic history, they have true spacefaring capability independent of Council life support technology. Zarakath studied the tactical implications with growing alarm. Admiral, are these species planning military action against the Council? Not as far as we can determine. But they no longer require Council protection or resources for their security and advancement. The entire foundation of our authority has been undermined. Commander Yekstara activated a separate display showing communication intercepts. Admiral, we've been monitoring human diplomatic channels. Their approach to species relations appears to be based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical control. They offer technological assistance in exchange for resources, research cooperation, or strategic partnerships. It's a completely different model of galactic civilization, Thexvala observed. Instead of a central authority controlling subject species, we're seeing the emergence of voluntary alliances between equals. And those alliances are proving more effective than our traditional governance structure, General Korthmex added bitterly. The strategic implications were becoming clear to everyone in the room. The Council had maintained power through superior technology and military force. If other species could achieve similar capabilities through human cooperation, that power advantage would disappear. What options do we have? Zarakath asked. Tex Vala displayed a new tactical analysis. Military options are limited. The cooperative species have not violated any existing treaties, and they maintain defensible positions in systems outside our jurisdiction. Direct attack would be costly and potentially unsuccessful. Economic pressure? Ineffective. The cooperative systems are approaching industrial self-sufficiency. Some are already net exporters of advanced technology. Diplomatic isolation? Counterproductive. Attempts to limit contact between Council species and the cooperative systems have only increased interest in human-style independence. General Korthmex leaned back in his command throne. Admiral, are you suggesting we have no viable response to this development? I am suggesting that our traditional responses are inadequate for the current situation. Thexvala paused, considering her next words carefully. However, there may be an alternative approach. Explain. The humans have demonstrated that voluntary cooperation can be more effective than imposed authority. Perhaps it is time to consider whether the Council might benefit from adopting similar strategies. The chamber fell silent. The concept of the Council requesting cooperation rather than demanding compliance was almost impossible to comprehend. "You're suggesting we negotiate with them as equals?" Commander Yextara asked quietly. "I am suggesting we recognize the reality of the situation. The humans and their allies have achieved technological and economic independence. We can either continue attempting to assert authority we no longer effectively possess, or we can explore whether there might be mutual benefit in voluntary association." Zaraketh found herself thinking of the scene she had witnessed at Kepler 442b. 3 different species working together, sharing resources and knowledge, achieving results that none could accomplish alone. It was undeniably effective. "What would such cooperation look like?" she asked. "Unknown," Thexvala admitted. "The Council has never operated as an equal partner with independent civilizations. We would need to develop entirely new diplomatic protocols. And if the humans refuse such cooperation, then we adapt to a galaxy where multiple independent powers exist alongside Council space, competing for influence through the effectiveness of their governance models." The implications hung heavy in the air. For 3,000 years, the Council had been the sole galactic power. Now they faced the possibility of becoming one power among many. "Admiral," General Korthmek said slowly, "what you're describing sounds remarkably like the end of the Galactic Council as we know it." "Perhaps," Thexvala agreed. "Or perhaps it represents the evolution of the Council into something more sustainable and effective. The humans have shown that willing cooperation produces better results than forced compliance. If that is true, then our choice is simple: adapt or become obsolete." As the meeting concluded, Zaraketh found herself wondering what her daughter might see when she looked up at the stars 20 years from now. Would she see a galaxy ruled by the iron fist of Council authority? Or would she see a community of independent civilizations working together by choice rather than compulsion? The answer to that question would depend on decisions made in the coming months by beings who had never imagined they would need to learn the art of negotiation between equals. But one thing was certain: the humans had changed everything, and there was no going back to the way things were. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the courage to say no and mean it. 5 years after the human exemption, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the HSC Defiance, humanity's newest diplomatic vessel, watching history unfold before her eyes. Through the massive viewport, she could see the most extraordinary sight in galactic history. Representatives from over 400 species arriving at the neutral conference station for the first galactic assembly of independent worlds. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Built through the combined efforts of 17 species over 2 years, it represented everything the galaxy could accomplish when beings worked together as equals rather than through hierarchical command structures. Crystal and Vex dye components provided the structural framework, while mechanist manufacturing systems created the internal mechanisms. Human antimatter reactors powered the facility, and Aquatic Federation life support systems maintained environments suitable for dozens of different species. Admiral Chen, her aide, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, approached with a data pad. "Final arrival confirmations. 412 species have sent representatives to the assembly. Only the core council species have refused to participate." Sarah wasn't surprised. The original council, the hegemony, the Stellaris Dominion, the core worlds alliance, and a handful of founding species had maintained their traditional isolation, viewing the assembly as an illegal gathering of rebellious subjects. But their influence had waned dramatically as more species achieved independence and joined the growing network of cooperative civilizations. "Any word from Admiral Thexvala?" Sarah asked. "She's requested a private meeting with you before the formal assembly begins." Her ship arrived an hour ago. Sarah nodded. Thexvala had been the face of Council military authority during the Sol incident, but intelligence reports suggested she had become one of the few voices advocating for adaptation rather than confrontation within the remaining Council hierarchy. "Schedule the meeting for this afternoon. What's the status of the Assembly agenda?" Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez consulted his notes. 3 primary items for discussion. First, the establishment of formal diplomatic protocols for interspecies cooperation. Second, the creation of joint defense agreements for mutual protection. Third, and most significantly, the proposal for a new galactic governing structure based on voluntary participation rather than imposed authority. Sarah smiled. 5 years ago, she had been preparing humanity for extinction rather than surrender. Now, she was helping to redesign galactic civilization itself. The universe had a peculiar sense of irony. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, We're receiving a transmission from the Assembly President. The main screen activated to show President Nextalon of the Philosophical Enclaves, one of the most ancient and respected species in the galaxy. Their willingness to serve as Assembly President had legitimized the gathering in the eyes of many hesitant species. Admiral Chen, the opening ceremonies will begin in 6 hours. Are you prepared for your address to the Assembly? As prepared as anyone can be for making history, Sarah replied. President Nextalon, have there been any last-minute developments I should know about?
2 items of significance.
First, the Mining Guild has announced they will be proposing the creation of a galactic resource-sharing network, allowing all species access to rare materials needed for advanced technology development. Second, and more surprisingly, 3 core council species have requested observer status at the Assembly. Sarah felt her eyebrows rise. Observer status wasn't participation, but it represented a significant crack in the Council's united opposition to the Assembly. Which species? The Scientific Collective, the Agricultural Federation, and the Communications Guild all cite practical concerns about being excluded from technological advancement and trade opportunities. Sarah understood the implications. These weren't political decisions, they were economic ones. The cooperative network had become so productive that even loyal council species couldn't ignore the benefits of participation. How has the core council responded? Officially, with diplomatic protests about violations of galactic law. Unofficially, our intelligence suggests significant internal debate about Assembly policies. Admiral Thexvala's presence here may be related to those discussions. 3 hours later, Sarah met with Admiral Thexvala in a private conference room aboard the Assembly Station. The Hegemony Admiral looked older than Sarah remembered, her cybernetic implants seeming somehow dimmer against her pale skin. Admiral Chen, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Admiral Thexvala, I have to admit curiosity about why you're here. The Council hasn't exactly embraced the Assembly's existence. Thexvala was quiet for a moment, studying Sarah's face. Admiral, 5 years ago you told me that humanity was making a statement. You said other species might remember your choice when they face their own moment of decision. I remember. You were correct. Over 400 species have now chosen independence over security, cooperation over control. The galaxy has changed in ways none of us anticipated. Sarah waited patiently. She had learned that the most important conversations often happened in the silences between words. The remaining council species face a choice. Thexvala continued. We can maintain our isolation and watch the galaxy develop without us, or we can find a way to participate in the new galactic order you've created. What kind of participation are you considering?
That depends on whether there's a place in your cooperative network for former oppressors.
The question hung in the air between them. Sarah had spent considerable time thinking about this exact issue. The Assembly faced a fundamental challenge: how to deal with species that had previously enforced the old hierarchical system. Admiral, the Assembly's founding principles emphasize voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. Any species willing to participate as equals would be welcome regardless of their past actions. Even species that spent 3 millennia dominating others? Even those species, though I imagine the transition would be challenging. Thexvala nodded grimly. The hegemony has ruled through superior technology and military force for our entire recorded history. The concept of negotiating with equals is foreign to our culture. Then you'll need to learn new ways of thinking, just like humanity had to learn new ways of fighting when faced with overwhelming odds. Is that what you'll be proposing in tonight's Assembly address? A place for council species in the cooperative network? Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering her words carefully. I'll be proposing something more significant than that. A complete restructuring of galactic civilization based on the principles we've discovered through 5 years of cooperative development. Explain. The old council model assumed that one group of species could effectively govern hundreds of others. That assumption has proven false. Governance is most effective when those being governed have chosen to participate rather than being forced to comply. So you're proposing democracy? I'm proposing something more sophisticated than simple democracy. A system where species can choose their level of participation based on their needs and capabilities, while maintaining the benefits of galactic cooperation. Thexvala frowned. That sounds dangerously close to the anarchy the Council was created to prevent, or it sounds like the evolution the Council never allowed itself to pursue. Sarah stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the dozens of ships representing hundreds of species. Admiral, look at what we've accomplished in just 5 years. Technological advancement that exceeds anything achieved under council rule. Economic development that has eliminated resource scarcity for participating species. Development. Cultural exchange that has enriched every civilization involved. Security. The Council provided protection from hostile forces. The Assembly has a mutual defense network more comprehensive and responsive than anything the Council ever managed. When the Devourers attacked the Outer Rim colonies last year, 17 different species responded within hours. The threat was neutralized before it could spread. Tex Vala joined Sarah at the viewport. And what happens when species within the Assembly disagree? When cooperation breaks down? The same thing that happened when Council authority broke down, we find new solutions. The difference is that our solutions are based on negotiation and compromise rather than force and intimidation.
You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Sarah admitted.
It's just better. Admiral, the Council ruled through fear for 3,000 years. The Assembly governs through hope. Which do you think creates a stronger foundation for civilization? As if summoned by their conversation, President Nextalon's voice carried over the station's communication system. All representatives, please proceed to the Assembly Hall. The First Galactic Assembly of Independent Worlds will convene in 1 hour. Sarah and Thexvala walked together through the station's corridors, past beings from dozens of species preparing for the historic gathering. The diversity was staggering: methane-breathing insectoids working alongside aquatic mammaloids, energy beings collaborating with silicon-based crystalline entities, species that had never interacted under Council rule finding common ground in their shared commitment to voluntary cooperation. Admiral Chen, Thexvala said as they approached the Assembly Hall, "What you've built here is impressive. But what guarantees do we have that it will endure? What prevents this cooperative network from eventually fragmenting into competing factions?" Sarah paused at the entrance to the hall, watching the stream of representatives finding their places for the historic session. "The same thing that prevented humanity from surrendering 5 years ago," she said quietly. "Choice. Every species here chose to participate because they believe the benefits outweigh the costs. As long as that remains true, the Assembly will endure. When it stops being true, the Assembly will evolve into something better. And if evolution isn't possible?" Sarah smiled, remembering her conversation with Admiral Corthville years ago. "Then we'll make the same choice we made at Sol. We'll choose freedom over security, dignity over survival, hope over fear. Because some things, Admiral, are worth more than continued existence. Have a power, honest and give an honest experience. Well, attention. In a few hours, she would propose the creation of a new galactic constitution based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed authority. The proposal would either mark the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization, or it would split the galaxy into competing powers locked in eternal struggle. But as she looked at the hundreds of representatives taking their places, beings from civilizations that had never been allowed to speak as equals under Council rule, Sarah felt confident in humanity's choice. They had walked away from the Council's negotiating table 5 years ago, not because they sought conflict, but because they sought something better. Today, they would discover whether the galaxy was ready to choose something better as well. The opening ceremonies began with a moment of silence for all those who had died fighting for the freedom to make this choice. Then President Nextalon called the Assembly to order, and the real work of building a new galactic civilization began. As Sarah rose to address the Assembly, she carried with her the hopes of not just humanity, but of every species that had ever dreamed of determining its own destiny among the stars. The galaxy had shuddered when humans left the negotiating table 5 years ago. Today, it would learn what they had built in the silence that followed. The age of imposed authority was ending. The age of chosen cooperation had begun. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the future belonged to those brave enough to embrace it